Hello everyone, welcome to part 7 of this series on AutoCAD. In this session, I will be looking at object selection in AutoCAD. We will be learning the different methods of selecting objects in AutoCAD. I will be explaining in details how to perform this important operation in AutoCAD. So, let's get started. So, welcome. So now let's get started. All right, so now to make selection in AutoCAD, there are actually three methods of making selection. So one method is called the cross-section method. Another method is called the window selection method. Then also we have the one-click method. So we have three methods of selecting objects in AutoCAD. We have the cross selection, the window selection, and the one-click selection. Now, so personally, the cross selection, I would call it the green box selection. Personally, I gave it the name green box. Later on, you will know why. So the cross selection, I call the green box selection. The window selection, I call it the blue box selection. Then the one-click selection, I call it individual selection. So whichever term I use, whether I say green box, blue box, individual. So I think that term green box, blue box, it makes it easier for you to understand. So you understand why I say green box and blue box. So now just bear it in mind that there are three methods of selecting objects. The cross selection, also called the green box, also called the green box selection, the window selection, also called the blue box selection, then one-click selection, also called the individual selection. So now let's learn these three methods. Okay, all right. So before we can select objects in AutoCAD, we need to have an object. We need to actually draw an object. So now, what do we call an object in AutoCAD? So object is the general name for whatsoever you draw. Whether you draw a line, you draw a rectangle, you draw a box, you draw a circle, the general term for all these objects or for all these drawings is called object. So when I say object, I'm referring to whatsoever you draw, whether it's a line, it's a circle, it's a rectangle, it's an ellipse, whatsoever that you draw, you generally call them objects. So now, before we can make a selection, we need to draw an object. So I will be going to my drawing tools and create a few objects. So I click on circle and okay, I'm going to off a drawing aid here. I'm going to put it off. It's called dynamic input. So I really don't like it on. All right, so I go and click on circle and I pick and I draw my circle. All right, also I draw a rectangle. Okay, I pick a line and I draw a line. All right. All right, so now I've drawn these objects. Okay, let me press escape here. All right, so now I want to make my selection. So this now I have three objects. I have a circle, I have a rectangle, and I have a line. These are three objects. Now I want to make selection. Selection is very important in AutoCAD. The reason is because now when you want to modify, modification will require you to select an object. You want to move, for instance, you need to select the object you want to move. You want to make a copy, you need to select the object you want to make a copy. You want to rotate, you need to be able to select the particular object you want to rotate. So you need to learn now, we are learning how to select. So now we have said there are three methods. So the first method I'll be talking about is the individual selection. Now for the individual selection, it means that I would have to touch the boundary of the object. For instance, now for me to select this circle, you can look at my cursor, you can focus on my cursor. So now for me to be able to select the circle, I need to touch the boundary of the circle to make that selection. So now you can see some blue grid points along the circle. So that means that the circle has been selected. Now I want to select the rectangle. Using the individual method, I will need to touch the boundary. All right. I want to select a line. I will need to touch the boundary. So now I've used individual method of selection to select three objects. So you can see those blue grid points showing that I have made a selection. So I've actually done three selections right now. So I'm going to press my escape on my keyboard to cancel the selection. All right, so I'll do this again using individual method of selection. So I'll just go ahead and click the boundary of the object in any order. Click 2, 3. So those have made three selections, three object selections. All right. Now next we are going to look at the green box selection. The green box, I call it green box selection, but normally, generally, they'll call it cross-section method, cross-section method, but simply I will just say green box method. Now, this is the reason why. Now, for the green box method, the green box method is a group method of selection. You can actually select the three objects at the same time. So now this is the green box selection. Now, obviously, you can see why it's green. I call it green box. Now you can see that green display. Now, so for the green box selection, I can make my selection just at once. So with the green box selection, I can do group selection. I'll press escape on my keyboard. So using the green box selection again, now we are going to observe something using the green box selection. Now, what you're going to observe is that my movement, it's like as if I'm drawing a rectangle. My movement is from right towards left. So I make a click on the right, then I move my mouse. Now I click, then I move my mouse to make sure that I'm touching other objects. Then I make another click. So I moved from right towards left. That's number one. The number two is you make sure that you are touching the object you want to select. So I'm going to press escape again. So I want to make another green box selection. Two things involved: move from right towards left. Then number two is make sure you touch at least the boundary of the object you want selected. All right. So now I click my first click, then I move my mouse. I make sure I touch the boundaries of the three objects, then I make another click. All right. So escape again. Now, when you are making your click, be sure that you are not dragging. I'm not dragging. Now, when you drag, you're going to get a different result. If you are dragging with your mouse, this is what you get, and it's not actually what you want. If you are getting something like this, it means that you are dragging your mouse. You don't have to drag your mouse. All you need to do, although it's still going to make that selection, but it might not make it the way you want. It might not be simple and straightforward. So all you need to do is just click, then move your mouse, not dragging, then make another click. As simple as that. All right. So now that is the green box selection used for group selection. Now the next thing we'll be looking at is the blue box selection. The blue box selection. Now there is just a little difference between green box selection and blue box selection. For the blue box selection, you'll be moving from left towards right. So now I'm going to repeat the same procedure, but this time I'll be moving from left to right. So I click without dragging, I move my mouse. Now, one thing about the green box selection is green box selection is going to select objects that is completely covered. Objects that is completely covered. Now, if you look at this, you will see that altogether I have three objects. The rectangle is completely covered. The line is completely covered, but the circle is not completely covered. So blue box selection, also known as window selection, is going to select objects that are completely covered. So I'm going to click again. Now you can see that it's selecting the rectangle and the line. It's not selecting the circle. Why? Because the circle was not completely covered. You want to press escape on my keyboard to start doing it again. Now I want to make selection. Now I'm going to be doing the blue box selection. Now I click without dragging. Now, if I do something like this, you can guess how many selections I'll make. Just one. Because only the circle will be completely covered. Rectangle will not be completely covered. Line will not be completely covered. So if I click again, I'm only making just one selection. So now the major difference between the green box selection and the blue box selection. The green box selection and blue box selection can be used for group selection. All right, at this point, I'm going to draw more objects. I'm going to draw more objects so we can try and observe more about our selections. Okay, so now the green box selection and the blue box selection, they are for group selection. They are for group selection. All right, so if I do something like this, you can guess how many objects I'm going to be selecting. I'll be selecting just three. I'll be selecting just three because you can see that some objects are completely covered and some objects are not completely covered. All right, so now the major difference between the green box and the blue box selection is that the blue box selection, it selects objects completely covered in the selection, while the green box selection will select object that is the selection is touching. The blue box selection selects objects completely covered in the selection, while the green box selects objects that the selection touches. So far it touches it. So now look at, now so far it touches the object. Now look at something like this. Now this is the green box now. So far it is touching the object, it's going to select. But for blue box selection, it has to completely cover it before it can make that selection. It has to completely cover it. So green box selection and blue box selection are used for group selection, but the difference is number one in the direction, while one is from left to right, another one is from right to left. So from right to left is the green, from left to right is the blue. So you can see why I call it green box selection and blue box selection. I prefer to use that term because it's more straightforward. Green box and blue box, green box and blue box. So now, three methods of selecting. You have individual method of selection, green box selection, and blue box selection. So you can decide to combine these three. Now, probably you have a lot of objects on your sheet. You have a lot of objects on your drawing sheet, and you want to make several selections. You can actually decide to combine these three methods. You can use green box, you can use it in combination with blue box, you can use individual tool with it. So now let's say, for instance, now here I use the green box. You can add your individual to it, then you can try to use your blue box. So whichever method, you can combine this method, these three methods of selection to get your results. So that's it. So object selection is very important in AutoCAD. Before you can use your modifying tool, you need to learn how to select object properly. So thank you for joining this particular session. So stay tuned for the next video.